Hello there, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to our reading of Margaret Anderson's The Unknowable Gurdjieff. I think we'll have a couple more sessions to go, and then we'll be finished. So by tomorrow evening, I imagine, we would have got through this and we can move on to whatever we're going to read next. And apologies, it's been quite a while since I've been live here with you, but there's been a lot going on, and I've needed to focus on that. But now, whatever that was has subsided, and here we are, back. We've got 2 chapters this evening. The first one is a French title, ch.7-8, which is this other thing, I believe, if Google Translate helped me. And then chapter 8 is everything. And so we're going to read both of those, and tomorrow evening we'll finish it. A few bits of housekeeping, some updates. I've been very busy uploading to the app, so you can go and sign up to the Patreon Book Club app. The whole of Beelzebub's Tales on there, and I'm beginning to upload both The Fourth Way and Idiots in Paris. So if you are interested in that, I should have put the link in the description. I haven't, but at some point I will. And yeah, I'm looking forward to being back. I've nearly got through all of the historical. A lot of what I've been uploading is historical talks from the previous channel, from Book Club. But once all that's done, I can begin sharing a new syllabus with you that I'm very keen to share, and hope that you guys are interested. And of course, there'll be lots of other readings. I think I've said the De Hartmann's Our Life with Mr. Gurdjieff, Czeslaw Czechowicz, Gurdjieff Master in Life, and we'll see what else. And also we're going to read Rudyard Kipling's Kim, just because someone's requested that. So if all that's interesting for you, as always, consider like the video, subscribe if you haven't yet. It would really help, and share the show so that other like-minded people can come and join us. And hello there, IOPVXV. Welcome. And welcome everyone watching and listening. It's good to be back with you. And so let's continue. Chapter 7, Cette autre chose. Georgette's effort to incorporate what she had assimilated during her years with Gurdjieff is recorded in the last part of her book, La Machine à Courage. The French press hailed the book as a chef d'oeuvre, and Cocteau did a preface for it, but no American publisher could be persuaded to take it. Therefore, I include its final chapters here. And I believe this is Georgette Lan, Madame Lan, I think. And we're going to go with that. So this seems like Margaret Anderson is going to quote the whole final chapter. So yeah, I guess that's what most of this chapter is, Georgette Lan. So, Fontainebleau-Avon, France. And again, this is Georgette, Madame Lan's writing, I believe. Fontainebleau-Avon, France. It was in June 1924 that Margaret, Jane and I went to stay at the Château de Prairie, for it was there that Gurdjieff lived and received people who sought him out from all over the world. My impression of Gurdjieff was that he resided on the earth as on a planet too limited for his own needs and function. Where did he manifest his real existence? In his teaching? In his writings? Not at all in ordinary social life, which he seemed to regard as a vast blague manipulated with resignation or impatience. I was not astonished that he was little known, that he was not surrounded by thousands of followers. Neither money nor influence could open the doors of the Prairie. Gurdjieff created all possible obstacles to discourage any idler spirits who might push their way into a world where they did not belong. I have never been able to acclimatize myself to esoteric cults and doctrines with their vague followers. Instinctively, I turn away. On the contrary, the sharp climate of Gurdjieff's mentation held me. It was a difficult climate. To live in it, one had to possess an invincible need. Oh, hello there, Graham. Says howdy, all. Nice to be back with you, Graham. And I hope that you are well. To know something of the stature of the man, one had to listen to the reading of his manuscript, an enormous work in 9 parts. My silent listening disappointed many in the audience who expected some audible sign of my interest. But I was entirely occupied in the process of absorbing, like a plant that has waited for water all its life. I cannot develop you, Gurdjieff told us. I can create conditions in which you can develop yourselves. Those conditions were hard, yet my greatest distress was not to have known earlier this hard instruction. In the beginning it seemed heartbreaking to approach such truths at last and to have so few years left to give to them. But soon the fact that I was working within myself, with an unawakened part of my nature, supplied me with a new strange energy. From now on I would know how to use the time remaining to me. I pictured myself as a honeycomb with each cell waiting to be filled. I followed avidly the daily monastic life of the priory, the conversations, the readings, the communal work in the gardens. Each day I tried to foresee the stages through which I would pass, and I laughed at myself, at this poor human being who dared to say, "I want to be." I dedicate my life to this end. It was like saying, "I shall work to fly like a bird." A scale runs from tadpole to bird. A scale runs from tadpole to bird. I did not know the number of notes. I knew only that each note led to the next, and that nothing in the world, book, word, or prophecy, would help me to know in advance what the next one would be. It would depend essentially on my organism. What astonished me was not to understand a little, but to see that some people, newcomers to the priory, did not understand at all. I sometimes had flashes of consciousness, so strong that a heat invaded me. Every hour I became aware of a soul I had not nurtured. 2 stories for each individual, himself and his shadow, that is, his soul. His appearance comes and goes with a name, a situation. His shadow, a reality which exists only by virtue of light, awaits its hour and enters unseen only at the end. I saw myself, like all human beings, as a repetition machine, and I had always aspired to a different state. Too long now I had rested in that illusory I that is like a Chinese maggot whose head nods yes perpetually to all our blindnesses, perpetually approves all our acts. Now I wanted to finish with all that old automatic life, so pleasant but so null, human life which leads to nothing unless it leads to everything. I began to work to change, and I felt as if I were being torn from my roots. Why should I cling so hard to that which I no longer clung to, which I had never really clung to? Did I underestimate the power of the bonds which attached me to nothing? Yes. I had thought myself different from my parents because I had lived my life differently. But what essential difference is there in that? It is only the menu of days, like the menu of meals. I am always asked in respect of this cosmogony which has now held my attention for so many years, is your source the same as Catherine Mansfield's? I answer, yes, in fact, no, in essence. In her journal, Catherine Mansfield wrote of the last months of her life at the Priory. It is not known that Gurdjieff had admitted her to the Institute with a reservation to his intimates, that it was too late to help her physically, but possible to help her in other ways. It is of these other ways that her journal and letters record less than she was able to express in her conversations with Orage. The greatness of Catherine was her sincerity. She was not pious, yet she felt the need of a redemption, of a system of purity. She wanted a spiritual life stripped of the clichés of religion. This spirituality of which he had such a magnificent need can be had without recourse to Gurdjieff. It already exists in the best of religion. It can be had without great effort. Gurdjieff offers much more. He is not consoling, he is better than that. What he offers is hard, like the teaching of Jesus, if one gets to its source. There is no truth that is complaisant. I think that the first requisite for an approach to Gurdjieff is a condition of health. One must be in full force to support the first shocks. There is, to begin with, the inconceivable torment of feeling oneself a ground that is being ploughed up. All at once our forces are solicited for an unknown labour. It is impossible. The more one sees and understands, the more one thinks, I cannot. But is it our forces that are solicited? No, it is a question of forces that we have never used, that we are ignorant of, new energies awakened by a new need towards a new goal. Hello there, Jean Harris. I am very well, thanks, and I hope you are too. How are you getting on? It's good to be back with you. Although at the Priory I experienced the happiness beyond any I had ever known, I also fell from despair to despair. My anxiety was total. I lived the meaning of the word bouleversé. At each instant I touched the depths of my distress, a vague distress in which I did not entirely participate. Even when a new flash of understanding came to me, I felt more lost than ever. The essential that I was seeking remained hidden from my sight. My only hope of finding it lay in my capacity for effort. But why do you want this knowledge? My old friends asked. Strange question. No one asks, why do you want happiness? To me, knowledge, or rather understanding, is a perfect synonym for happiness. Others said, never look inside yourself, it is fatal, or what can one do with one's life when one has lost all illusions? I answered, that's as if a farmer said, all the weeds in my field have been pulled up. What can I do with the ground now? Years and years ago I used to think, our natures should be ploughed up as the ground is ploughed. But where was the plough, and who would guide it? Alone we could do nothing. The plough and the planter were as necessary as the seed. Gurdjieff's method indicated the instrument and the guide. They were ready and waiting. It was for me to be ready and willing. Wish, need, and effort. It was with these requirements that one approached that other life, with its special efforts, its new laws, its different evolution, which tended to change even the chemistry of one's organism. It was to be a difficult life. At the Priory I watched certain people stop halfway, renounce or branch off, become enemies and enroll themselves in some promising system which guaranteed paradise at the end of their days. Sometimes they returned to religion and declared themselves touched by grace, a grace which usually corresponded to their most material needs and in which they installed themselves comfortably with all their luggage as if for a voyage. They took a one-way ticket to paradise, but I noticed that more often than not they changed it for a round trip. What an error it is to believe that suffering alone is enough for self-development. If it were, our planet would already be covered with saints and angels. Suffering kills some people, others are deformed by it, some become mad. Only a few improve or progress. One must have more knowledge to benefit by suffering. All my life I had instinctively been a believer, but I could not accept the God proposed by religion. A God conceived merely as a refuge or a hope, when he should be the divine progression of the soul which contains him. But every human being is the mirror of the God he conceives, and most are pocket mirrors. During all my first months at the Priory, my ground was being ploughed. For a long time I thought I had recognized my non-entity. For a long time I thought I had known my vanity. Now I saw that this judgment was still a kind of vanity, so I watched myself. I began to know myself a little. And for anyone who came in late or missed the start, this is Georgette Lands, I believe, and a passage from her diary, her book. For 2 years we lived at intervals at the Priory. From then on until 1935, we encountered Gurdjieff more rarely, but we continued to live, as far as we could, according to his principles, absorbing his doctrine more and more deeply. When people reach my age, they announce in a tone of curious satisfaction that they are getting old. Their task is done. They can now relax. It is for others to live. They judge life to be finished when, to me, it has barely begun. They see it as a curve when it can and should be an ascending line. To me, life begins at 50 and never stops growing. It is the moment to live autre chose. I have the feeling that I have lived all my life for my particular present. I must admit that I have not finished with art and moonlight, music and spring, and that I will never be insensible to all the delights that are the adorable froth of the earth. But these delights are now no longer between my sight and my life. Learning to live demands no starting abdications. It leaves old delights in their place, but not their ancient power. It brings a new purpose, a new fire, and infinite new ways of seeing all things. The material of my former life now lay behind me. It was my first life, the life none of us knows how to live, except in disorder and bewilderment. I was now ready to give all my energy to those conditions which Gurdjieff had named as the terms of development. It was not easy. I felt like a bird tapping to get out of its shell. What lay beyond for me would be as different as the world outside the shell would be for the bird. Often I wanted to escape, to turn away from this super science which demanded too much of me. Yet escape seemed criminal as well as impossible. A truth once perceived, even for a second, is never lost. It comes to light again in spite of everything. And if one wants to live this truth, one realizes that one has been promised to it, that all the events of a lifetime have been conveying towards it. I was slowly changing, and I was afraid of no longer recognizing myself. Between the non-existent image which had been my companion and this new image that I barely saw, a fog was rising. In it both images were obliterated, and I pursued them blindly, afraid of finding neither. The year 1936 arrived. I had surmounted 3 grave illnesses in the past 4 years, but I had not yet regained my familiar endless energies. During my struggle with death, I had thought, if I am to live, I swear to myself to go further than before. I do not give myself the right to come out of danger in the same state in which I entered it. Later, as danger withdrew, all the useless associations, the superfluous speculations returned. I was saved, but restored to habit, to all that we call normal life, and I was accepting it. A cry of revulsion rose in me, rested petrified in my throat. I sensed that a new cycle of catastrophes would begin if I could not, by a supreme effort, turn my life at last towards its high aim. I must begin to understand better what I already understood, all that the past had taught me in showing me that what is essential lies elsewhere. This life of mine, which in the past had seemed beautiful, had none of it served a purpose. This perfumed wax in which I had modelled my years of art, of love, and faith in both, was this all that I could contribute to the miracle of life on earth? No, I was ready to step from the present into what would be, at last, the future which is in us and awaits our attention. And here's a quote from the Bible, a well of water. Quote, "But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life." St. John 4:14. And so, armed with a supreme resolution, I arrived at that moment of life which is called descending the other side of the hill, but which to me is an ascension. Gurdjieff was again in Paris, and I was able to see him continually until the war began in 1939. of that constant association with him, of that work towards development, which no well-being, no happiness could equal for me, I find it almost impossible to write. Many people have investigated doctrines analogous to the Gurdjieff science. To write of them in a word, in a few words, in infinite words, is to deform them. The truth that can enter into a formula is limited. To write abstractly of Gurdjieff's conceptions in relation to other great systems of thought, belief, religion is equally futile. I know the danger of verbalizing over abstract ideas, unless it is to repudiate them. Negations are greeted kindly, and the thinker who offers nothing but an hypothesis is always respected. An hypothesis is a lifebelt for the mind. Thanks to it, the mind floats a little longer before sinking. I know, too, what the very term search for truth suggests of the absurd, the pretentious, the erroneous, the hysterical. Research seems futile. It is less so, however, than to settle oneself comfortably, eyes closed, into a life of which one understands nothing. And so, in relation to Gurdjieff's doctrine, which became for me truth, I shall tell simply what I have felt, experienced, and understood. I shall not say what I hope from it, but what I have learned to want from it. I shall try to tell what it has done for me in transforming my aspirations into a single and total energy. In the little red diary which lies before me on my desk, I reread the record of what I felt, experienced, and understood during those 3 great years. I live again the exaltation and the agony of those daily efforts I made to awaken and develop what was sleeping in me, as in all human beings. I have copied out some pages of this diary, words written from time to time in the long nights without sleep, which became for me my nights of light. The Diary. Paris, June 1936. Apparently finally found Rue Casimir-Perrier between the church and trees. Often in pain, difficult epoch, but marvellous end of month because of my new meeting with Gurdjieff. Went to see him in the cafe where he always sits before lunch. Time passes for me, I said to him, and I make no progress. I have not many more years to live. Will you allow me to read the new parts of your manuscript? He looked long at me. At last he said, You still have time to live. Yes, come to lunch tomorrow, and you will read. He murmured words I did not understand. Finally I caught, You are young, but liver sick, all organs blocked. He paused and then said, Yes, I will do for you. I wanted to cry out my gratitude, but I restrained myself, knowing that he understood all I felt. I articulated painfully, Thank you. June the 22nd. Lunched with him, his family, and a few pupils in his apartment. After lunch he showed me a little room and a cupboard where he would leave the manuscript for me. He said I might come and read whenever I liked. June the 27th. Every day I spend 2 or 3 hours at his flat. I read with concentration as if my life depended on the difficult thought that comes from his pages. June 28th. Ill again. Couldn't go to read. Thursday, July the 16th. I am much better. Told Gurdjieff that for the first time in 20 years I have slept the night through. He was glad and not surprised. He assured me that I would recover, that he had a plan for me, and repeated a second time, You are young. I understood later that he was referring to my healthy glands. He explained that for the first part of the work would take 5 years, that the body must be strong enough to march with the spirit, because the world of the spirit depends on the body which carries it. In Tibet, where he spent so many years of his life, the priests are doctors and the doctors priests. At lunch he told the others that my case interested him. She was candidate for death. She is already candidate for life. Then he looked at them with eyes of mischief. I only said to her, Read the book, madam. Read the book. And that would be Beelzebub's Tales. Read the book. July the 20th. What physical amazement when I find I can lie full length on my bed after so many years of half reclining, and what astonishment in a body that is dreading pain which does not come. I often feel a great internal heat, as if I were close to a fire. I sleep without waking. I believe that a silent and healing perturbation is taking place in me. I understand what is happening, but to live, it is unbelievable. July the 27th. Arrived at his flat tired, dragging myself along. Read the book for 3 hours. When I left, I felt light and strong. Walked 2 kilometers without weariness. Physically, I am living a springtime in this cold month of July. I feel charged like a dynamo. Oh, hello and good evening, everyone. Coming in later on. We're just reading from, it's not, it's Henriette Lands, isn't it? I've just remembered it's not, Georgette isn't Georgette Lands. So I've been saying the wrong name. It's Henriette Land. So I don't know who Georgette is. Maybe someone can help in the chat if they can remember a reference previously to Georgette Lands, because I'm definitely lost now. But we're reading from Georgette's diary, whoever that is. Not Georgette Lands, that's for sure. But let's continue. And lovely to see you all. July the 30th. Gurdjieff came in while I was reading. I was at the end of the chapter on religions. Told him my exaltation in as few words as possible. He doesn't like manifestations. He was visibly satisfied. He considers that my health is better and better. As I was leaving, he said, "As yet nothing. Soon will begin something more." End of August. Never any more pain. I discern something immense that is happening in me. Evidently, the brain is not our sole organ of control. Other organs also register what takes place in us, and perhaps more accurately than the brain does. I have the impression of a wheel turning within me, motored by a renewed bloodstream and by my conscious will to receive the help given me. I am experiencing the wonderment of something that is not hereditary. September the 27th. For several months it has been clear that men are unconsciously creating what they call the inevitable, that is, war, and at the same time declaring sincerely that they want only peace. September the 30th. Every day I go to study his manuscript. I consider it the authentic event of my life. The time of destruction, the war approaches, yet we work to finish our apartment, which is more and more adorable because of the arched doorways we have constructed throughout. Sooner or later we will lose it. I have a special anguish as I realize the strength of the energies restored to me. Desires, needs, wishes now assail me after 3 years in which I have tried to reconcile myself to the idea of death. October the 29th. Another period of dark days. Since I am no longer tense with perpetual suffering, I feel a curious laxness. And then winter is on the way. My organism follows the uneasiness of the earth beneath its pale, cold colours. The branches of trees make mechanical gestures towards the sky. One's organism has its habits. Because mine has suffered so long, it wants to go on suffering. It is more nervous, more sensitive, and I feel myself slipping. I have moments of discouragement. I try not to admit them, but they are there nevertheless. October the 31st. I described my state to him. He already knew, and his words brought me comfort, for he made me understand how the law of up and down works in all functioning. Monday the 2nd of November. A great emotion today. When I arrived at Gurdjieff's apartment, it was he himself who opened the door. I said immediately, "I am completely well. I am in a new body." The light that came from the little salon illuminated him fully. Instead of avoiding it, he stepped back and leaned against the wall. Then, for the first time, he let me see what he really is, as if he had torn off the masks behind which he is obliged to hide himself. His face was stamped with a charity that embraced the whole world. Transfixed, standing before him, I saw him with all my strength, and I experienced a gratitude so deep, so sad, that he felt a need to calm me. With an unforgettable look, he said, "God helps me." November the 4th. From the beginning he has said, I can prevent pain and thereby prepare the ground for something else. I know that he means a special work in which the tempo of the spirit will keep pace with the physical recovery. But have I the strength to undertake it? November the 25th. Tonight after dinner, Gurdjieff played his little accordion piano. Unique spectacle. This is the man who says, I try to be a man without quotation marks. As he played, one saw a man live, as complete as a circle, and the richness of his smile, richness of bounty, richness of truth. Christmas Eve 1936. Extraordinary reunion at his flat tonight. Another age. A patriarch distributing treasures. The little apartment was full. His family, friends of his family, the concierge and his family, old servants from other days. The Christmas tree, too big, too high, was bent against the ceiling, and its stars hung down. The distribution of gifts was a true ceremony. 50 or more large boxes, numbered, occupied a corner of the salon. Gurdjieff, standing in front of a table, glasses on his nose, held a list in his hand. To each box that was set before him, he added notes of 100 or 500 francs. Then he called a name corresponding to a number and presented the box, making the brief gesture that signifies, "Don't thank me." The last to come forward was a Danish doctor who received a handsome dressing gown and a 1,000-franc note. As Gurdjieff placed the money in the box, S said, "He's going to be happy, that one." Gurdjieff answered like lightning, "Not you." At 10 o'clock supper was served. On each plate was an enormous piece of mutton, a stuffed Russian roll, pickles, peppers, preserved in oil, all the things I hold in horror. But superb desserts were spread out, cakes, fruits, candies of 1,001 nights. We left at midnight and other people took our places. The Russian maid said to me, "From 1 o'clock till dawn, the poor will be coming." We know that for him a period of fasting will follow this feast to balance so many days of abundance. December the 30th, Resurrection. Absorbing and primordial question for me, the successive deaths and the perpetual renewals of life. Addition of what was, what is, and what will be. A new kind of resurrection begins in me. I am invaded by the all-powerfulness of spirit. This surpasses life itself. December the 31st. If I am able to understand Gurdjieff a little in his entirety, it is because I have studied him and his doctrine for over 12 years. One of his greatest values is knowing how to render intelligible to human understanding the truths that are the most impossible for the mind of man to conceive. My intelligence? No, I don't value it. And anyway, in these matters, intelligence moves into second place. What I have always valued in myself is not my intelligence, but a fundamental lucidity which has never failed me in all the disasters of my existence. Before my experience with Gurdjieff, I saw the time approaching when this lucidity alone would be left in me, like a flag on an empty house. My notes from January 1937 to the following December show only long months of effort, the climbing and falling known to all those who have tried to follow the difficult road of knowledge. But what does this vague phrase, road of knowledge, mean? Philosophers claim that all knowledge can be found within four walls, in books, yet everyone can read Hermes, Pythagoras, Buddha, the Bible, and remain blind before these closed codes. It is not enough to read, admire, speculate. The study of know thyself demands a special work and a life given up to it. One must begin the work. What one has learned, one must incorporate. The time that stretches between these two states is full of panic, but all initiation holds a period of panic, just as all work holds within it the same laws. The road, which at first appears to be vertical, becomes less steep as one climbs. Some of the pages of my diary during this period are almost incoherent with despair. At other moments I had no despair, neither had I hope. I was living in a tunnel. Then, on the 10th of October, I wrote. Sorry, just give me a minute. It's bugging me. I don't know whose diary we are reading beyond Georgette. But there must be more. She has a book, La Machine à Courage. So I'm just going to Google that quickly and we'll find out whose diary we're actually reading. La Machine à... Oh, Georgette Leblanc. La Machine à Courage is the French title of a memoir by Georgette Leblanc. So if you're interested in that, looks like you can find a PDF easy enough. La Machine à Courage, Georgette Leblanc. So now we know. If anyone was as concerned as I am, now you know too. And this is the 10th of October. I know that I am approaching a momentous state. I know the balance I must maintain in all the coming tests, and some lines of Goethe haunt me. No path, it is the jungle that one cannot penetrate, and then in the eternally empty distance you will see nothing. You will not hear the sound of your footsteps. You will have nothing upon which to rest. End quote. I know this, and I detest my anguish. However great it is, I judge it to be small, yet I am afraid, with 1,000 fears which have no name. It is my parents, my ancestors, who are afraid in me. Why listen to their fears? I was not so afraid when I faced death. Was that then more natural? Yes. Others before me have done what I am doing, but that does not help me. Each person's experience is different. I envy those who plunge in without hesitating. I am ashamed of my hesitation. I seem to be bargaining. A small life for a great truth I must choose. Yet I want to discuss the choice with myself before I give up this self to its task. I will advance in darkness. Seeing will be abolished for the sake of being. The hardest moment of all will arrive. The guide will watch me stumble, exhaust myself, and will say nothing. His words were, I cannot develop you. I can create the conditions in which you can develop yourself. I'm glad to hear that. IOP, VXV, I'm glad that you're enjoying the reading. We're nearly finished this chapter and then we'll get on to the final chapter of the evening. But first, October the 12th. I had a dream. I walked for years, searching a planet. Across space I arrived. At first I thought that the cities, the people, the things were like ours. Soon I saw that all was different. People loved one another and they did not speak. The animals spoke. I had a long conversation with a white horse as large as a cathedral. He explained to me his two-dimensional vision and his terrors. He understood that I was burning, and to relieve me, he hung his mane like a rein about my body. It was he who explained the celebration of a fate such as did not exist in our world. 3 seasons had conquered the 4th. I watched the triumphal return of the troops. Regiments of all the countries advanced, flags flying, followed by springtime and early autumns. They had killed the winters. They were not accompanied by good and evil. Their songs were bells. Their laughter was like the sunlit sea. To amuse themselves along the way, they had disciplined plagues, abolished pain, hunted down calumny. My companion said, with winter dead, they have killed the inevitable. Now death will be no more than a result, the consequence of not having understood. Suddenly one of the men fell from high up on the ground before me. He split in two. he was empty. October the 18th. The important moment is here. My choice has been made. Tomorrow we will ask Gurdjieff, Margaret and I, whether the time has come for us to begin our real work. When I really begin, nothing will have changed in appearance. I will still have my name that I do not like. I will be dressed as I am now. I will go tomorrow morning and simply say to Gurdjieff, I will do. Just those 3 words, but for me, before myself, they will be the authentic beginning of my life. When I say those words, I will see before me a succession of unknown experiences which I will pass through without perceiving the end. My end, I believed, would be my death. Now there comes an end before the end, a death before my death, and it is to win a life. October the 19th. 5 o'clock in the morning in my room, Casimir Perrier. The sky is pale blue behind the still trees. All is happy and calm. Why? Why did I have to learn that one can live beyond this easy, lovely human life? I love that life. At 11 o'clock, Margaret and I will ask Gurdjieff to begin. Later, he has agreed and given us a rendezvous at his house, tomorrow at 1. October the 20th, late afternoon. Divine weather in the Luxembourg Gardens. I sat on a bench near the fountain and thought about the new work Gurdjieff had explained this morning in a manner so clear, so total, that I understood it without understanding all his words. For me, it is the long-awaited revelation, so real that it has infinite repercussions in my being. Many years ago, it may be 40, I wrote to Maeterlinck. I do not know if you understand me. I am comparable to a bubble that floats in the air and is attached to nothing real. Even in the depths of myself, I feel that I am not. One single preoccupation perhaps exists in this void. It is my anxiety at seeing myself thus, and, as if to change, I must accomplish something unknown. It comes from very far in me, like a lost idea, a commandment to which I can give no form. And I search. Today, a life later, now that I have found at last what one can do, I see again those words. As if to change, I must accomplish something unknown. £11 at night. Today, this 20th of October 1937, I have lived a few real moments. End of December. I am living too hard. I am tired. My sleep is made of paper. If at this moment I saw death approaching, I would not accept it as I did in the hospital beds where I spent so many months. Now my time is heavy with a true abundance of which I have never dreamed. I said to Gurdjieff, I am almost afraid. Life rises in me like the sea. He repeated, it is only a small beginning. The Lighthouse, summer 1938. Now that I have collected my notes written during my change of route, I am struck by an essential paradox which I find hard to understand. What was that anguish, that despair, which was in me and yet so far from me? It took place so far from my lived life that it never had a voice, not one audible cry. Why that pain when I had no pain? Is the soul then really elsewhere? I did not know it had to suffer to beget itself. Since it is my life, how could it have been so outside my human days? I write these words in the circle of a flashlight, in order not to disturb the 2 sleepers who might see a glow in my room and think me ill. I had been sleeping after assembling my notes this afternoon and all evening. Now it is night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Through the window the moon and its reflection in the water touched my bed. I was asleep, and suddenly my sleep was torn in two by an idea. Where did that despair of which I wrote take place, when my life was so happy? The circle of light falls clearly on my notebook. I hear the silky pulsation of a passing boat. A red glow moves across the ceiling. I have lived for years in the shadow of a deep preoccupation which, however, clarified me and uncovered many things to my sight. Is it that my subconscious has its own life which does not identify itself with mine? Mine could be in peace while the other was living its own personal drama. That drama is like a love that has no name, no face, and that struggle perpetually takes a form, to be and to give being to someone. That someone was I, who did not know it. That's the end of chapter 7, and one more chapter this evening, chapter 8, which is titled Everything. Cheers. So everything, and I think we're back with Margaret Anderson. We finished with Georgette LeBlanc, and now we're back with Margaret Anderson, and she's going to tell us about everything. And it's lovely to see you all here. It's quiet in the chat. Do feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're watching and listening from. Alternatively, you can just enjoy the reading, but it's nice to be with you. And last chapter of this evening, chapter 8, Everything. What exactly was the change that had taken place in us? It had happened so slowly that it was imperceptible for a long time, even to our friends. Gradually, we had begun to ask ourselves what our former attitudes, standards, ideas, and behavior had to do with Gurdjieff's transvaluations, and we had to answer, very little. As Orage had said, objective thinking means coming to the end of subjective thinking and then doing something else. So all our efforts were directed towards discovering that something else. In our quest of self-discovery, Jane once suggested that we make kaleidoscopes of our lives, past and present. We worked hard at them, trying to keep them free of self-delusion, but it was sometimes depressing to realize how slowly we came upon more exact self-knowledge. Georgette offered one of her kaleidoscopes for comment and criticism, and I still have the letter in which Jane discussed it. So, another quote from a letter from Georgette. If I'm right, if I've read that right, Georgette offered one of her kaleidoscopes for comment and criticism, and I still have the letter in which Jane discussed it. So this is a letter from Jane to Margaret Anderson discussing Georgette's kaleidoscope. Easy. Very good. But in our present state, the combinations in the kaleidoscope are limited because every individual starts out as a different combination of chemicals from each other. Every individual has many sets of these combinations. The conditions under which he develops determine which set he shall bring forth. Because there is no conscious chemist in the laboratory, only a few chemicals ever come into action, and they come into action mechanically through the action of environment and through the interaction with other chemistries of other beings. Once set in motion, these chemicals make patterns which we call characteristics and repeat, habit. All of this remains in the biological realm, and in that realm the combinations may be very great, but not limited. Oh, hello there, Dale Axelrod from Petaluma, California. Thanks for saying hello there, Dale, and I hope you're having a nice day. On the other hand, if there were a chemist in the laboratory, the combinations could be infinite, all potentialities. The conscious chemist is, of course, the Gurdjieff method. In your kaleidoscope of today, there is a long paragraph lamenting the loss of love, which is a key paragraph to use in an effort to conquer illusion. You must show that you have learned that instinctive love and its manifestations of attraction, repulsion, sacrifice, courage, crime, etc., its mechanical and chemical combinations that we call love, courtship, marriage, children, family, etc., is only the human equivalent of that great laboratory in which nature is the chemist. Your interpretation of those chemical manifestations was your love image and an illusion. To be in a state of instinctive love is to be in a state of danger, and to be dangerous to oneself or to the other or to both. Because we are polarized to a great force, it is only fortune that keeps us from damaging someone. Love without knowledge is demoniac. And to lament, suffer, explain, justify, all of this is to show lack of knowledge, lack of strength. In another paragraph, there is something feverish, as if you had not yet been cured of the illness. Not aloof, not identified. It is my opinion that you should destroy the last vestige of that old love image in your effort to understand it. That you should, in the future, having established the first therapeutic condition, wish to cure yourself. Resolve never again to cast one lingering look in the direction of the past. Refuse to allow any associations to drag up any part of it. Put the whole experience where it belongs, in another time, belonging to another person. Dismiss meta-link from your mind and memory, consciously. You're allowing a mortgage to stand against your own development. When you speak of resentment, calumny, hatred shown towards you, they are only the negative side of something you thought divine when it was manifesting itself positively. Do not stand back and register horror, surprise, or the inability to understand. Try to show that your confusion of emotions or mind was a lack of knowledge in respect of the two men. You had a great love with Metalink and a great physical experience with the other. Neither you nor they had any power, direction, or control over any of it. They were as powerless in their lacks as in their love. It is insanity to speak of beings as if they were capable of acting consciously, and if one does act consciously, who is there to understand such an action? What centre was in love with Metalink? Rarely all three centres function in any love, and never at the same time. How much did you love the image of yourself that he created with his words? Love yourself in him, the woman on the pedestal. How long were you invulnerable? All true loves are invulnerable to everybody but their beloved. Infidelity is a sign that the physical centre has grown indifferent. The basis of instinctive love has a shift of its centre of gravity, or one was not at the moment mentally or perhaps emotionally in love with the beloved, thus taking one off one's guard and making one's organism unfaithful. Here is a grand field for investigating the illusion. Investigate in your present state of development the reactions in you to love. Did you make an illusion of those reactions, or have you had the illusion that you made an illusion? It is all an hallucination that you loved Metalink as you think you loved him. Did you love him at all? Did you love your ideal of love? Are you sure that it isn't a super Metalinkian fantasy? All this love, this suffering, has it any reality? Didn't you start wrong? Weren't the original elements, vagueness, pride of mind, self-love, vanity, art, the theatre, the elements that were difficult to break with when the time arrived that love was over? You have said so, or have intimated it. Try to formulate it in terms of the method. And that is the end of Jane's letter, I believe, and now we're back to Margaret Anderson again. It is vivifying to re-examine our years in New York during the war, when people urged us to talk about Gurdjieff and his ideas, and we made great efforts to do it without proselytizing. It was often difficult to make the right impression. I remember one night when, after a long and we thought clarifying exposition, helplessness overcame me when one of our audience began to pace up and down the living room of our New York house, expounding her own understanding of what we had been saying. It must all come down to this, I think. You do your best to accomplish some good in the world. You try to help others. You are nice to everyone. If there's any expectation of heaven, you've done all you can. She was a very nice person, and I wanted to tell her a story. One night when we were dining with Gurdjieff in Paris, someone said, "Such a nice man, Mr. Gurdjieff, who came to lunch today." "Yes," Gurdjieff said, "nice man, because here at table was asleep. Everyone nice when asleep, but you press on one of his corns, and then you see what kind of a man he is." Everyone always asked, is there a personal God in the Gurdjieff theory? When we said there is not, they became angry. We tried to elucidate. Gurdjieff once compared our relationship to God as the relationship between us and the bacteria population of our bodies. These billions of bacteria can have no knowledge of us, just as we can have no knowledge of God. Nevertheless, it can be said that the bacteria exist, that we exist, and that God exists. More anger. Then Jane would say, the idea of a personal God is the most egotistical gesture of man, that a divine, omnipotent being should be concerned with our transient life. Those who love the personal God idea are those who serve 1,000 personal gods, art, vanity, etc. One of you here shows in 5 minutes that she believes in a personal God, her own judgment of other people's acts. The Gurdjieff method is a method to rid you of personal gods. No one has ever loved a God as we love ourselves. Few people were able to understand Gurdjieff's talk about the I, man's potentiality of development, and everyone was annoyed by his concept of man as a machine. If that's true, one of our antagonists said, all I can say that a machine is a wonderful thing. Yes, Jane said, but it's not a wonderful thing for a man to be. Some of our most violent discussions were about Gurdjieff's idea of chief feature. Every man has a chief feature. It is an outgrowth of his emotional attitude towards himself. Our life is controlled by these chief features. They are founded on vanity, self-love, fear, greed, sex, and lying. Why is he so drastic? People asked. He gives no hope for anyone. We always felt that he held out the only hope. Not that we were overconfident about our own self-development, but it surprised us that many people didn't respond to his ideas as we did. Sometimes we gave up. We had an English friend who often came to ask questions and to air her own views. At first I thought her questions rather searching, and I began to hope that she would finally understand what Gurdjieff had in mind. Then one night, after she had been silent for a long time, she addressed Jane in a social voice. Tell me, Jane, is Gurdjieff a gentleman? Incredible as it now seems to me, I've forgotten Jane's answer. Perhaps she only laughed, but I remember how she answered Rom Landau, who wanted to put Gurdjieff's idea of the octave into a book he was writing. God is my adventure, and asked Jane to help him. Formulate what you want to say, she wrote to him, and if there's anything I can do, I'll do it. After his formulation, Jane wrote, all your problems are solved, octave, nature, scope, function, and explained in Gurdjieff chapter Purgatory, and amplified in chapter Eptaparaparshinok. Your formulation does not contact the world of thinking in which the Gurdjieff octave has a place. To avoid philosophizing, our talks sometimes went like this. One night in an argument, a scoffer challenged me by saying, now tell me if you can, who is the Holy Ghost? I can try, I said, if you'll ask me what instead of who. Oh, I'll ask, but I'm sure you can't answer. Well, I said, you know about positive and negative electric currents? Certainly. What makes them produce light in this lamp, for instance? They pass through a transformer in some electric power plant. All right. You can call that transformer a third force. So you have 3 forces, positive, negative, and neutralizing. Always 3. Every event, every situation, every actualization, every phenomenon is a result of 3 forces acting together. The third force, the neutralizing or form-giving force, which brings the other 2 together, can be called the Holy Ghost. Why? Who says so? Why don't you say? Can't you think of a simple answer, an illustration? No, all I can think of is, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. All right, I said. Take a father. He's an active, positive force. Take a mother. She's a passive, negative force. They produce a child. But there's no child unless positive force meets negative force. What is the third force that brings them together? They must feel an attraction. All right, then your answer is desire. In this case, desire is the Holy Ghost. Well, well, she said, perfectly simple. N'est-ce pas? Perhaps, I said, but then you must stretch the idea out to take in the creation of the universe. Oh, she said, then, but what can I do? But that I can't do, can you? No, I said, but we can think about it. Almost everyone was shocked by Gurdjieff's statement that the whole foundation of man's essence has become the psychic properties of cunning, envy, hate, hypocrisy, contempt, slyness, ambition, and double-facedness. Why doesn't he include love? Many people are motivated by love. Yes, Jane would answer. Let's have a little precision. And she would formulate in her own words some of the ideas about love in Gurdjieff's All and Everything. And here are a few quotes or a few paraphrasings from Jane Heap. Love is always of three kinds: instinctive or physical. Love is always of three kinds: instinctive or physical love, emotional love, and conscious love. Physical love depends on type and polarity, a person whose type influences your chemistry. Emotional love begets the opposite, emotion, hate, and conscious love begets love of a like kind. The statement about emotional love usually provoked fierce debates. Is the most ideal type of love, someone would always insisted. Jane would continue. Emotional love is pathologic. The lover is a medium through which an uncontrolled power of magnetism passes. Emotional lovers are the victims of their own unconscious power. Emotional love always creates hate in the lover, then in the loved one, then back again, an eternal changing of the hate. Emotional love seldom produces offsprings. It is non-biological. It evokes its own slayer. Physical love has chemistry at its basis, and it lasts as long as and is only as strong as that chemistry. This is the highest type of love we know because of its radiations, since we know little about conscious love. Conscious love wishes that the loved object should arrive at its own native perfections regardless of the consequences to the lover. The paradox, it always evokes the same love in the beloved. This type is rare among us. Christ was love, someone would always announce at this point. Jane, Christ appealed to love. It didn't exist strongly enough. It exists less strongly now. He appealed to something that wasn't there. And she went on. In these talks you must always know which realm you are talking in. 1. The status quo world, the world at any given moment as we now are, or 2. The dynamic world, the world of becoming. Distinguish always between these two worlds, and when you talk of Christ, try to think of the crucifixion as a conscious act in a conscious drama. In the 1920s and 30s, when Orage was lecturing in New York, he used a terminology that I found specially rewarding. For example, quote, "A body is an organization. The physical body is an organization. Just so the emotional body is an organization. The mental body also. What is the energy we use to create a higher emotional and mental body? We must use an energy that is stronger than the mind or the emotions. When nature created us, she created a surplus energy, that which goes into ideals, etc. This surplus was created for higher consciousness. Its conscious use is self-development, self-perfectionment." And this, again from Orage. Emotions and ideas have the same persistence as physical objects. The persistence is relative. Discrimination of emotions and ideas as if they were objects is the development of astral formal reason. But until your organism is as objective for you as any object, you cannot have any sense of the quality of objective reason. The ability to discriminate between words and their associations, verbal reason. The ability to discriminate between emotions and ideas is formal reason, and verbal discrimination, that is, speculative reason, is rated lowest by Gurdjieff because it does not lead to formal or objective reason. This is why he says, don't philosophize. I wish to arouse an abandonment of the attempt to formulate objective reason. There is nothing in objective reason that is a shadow of subjective reason. Objective reason means coming to the end of the subjective reason and then having an experience that is totally different. Pupil. Is it possible to attain formal reason? Orage. Voluntary suffering is an effort to have personal experience in place of what has been verbal or associative experience. Objective reason implies the ability to think without being affected by conditioning or heredity. It is different from the reasoning we know. This is why, Margaret, you are baffled by Gurdjieff at the table. The Gurdjieff science is a science of experience. The question to be asked is the report a part of transient knowledge or of permanent knowledge? You can find this only for yourself, by working on yourself. What is a real experience? One in which the whole being takes part, a whole experience. You know it when it happens. Experience, to be anything, must belong to a system of things, the affirmed emotions of mankind. And that ends Orage's quote. Back to Margaret Anderson. In New York in 1946, when we were planning our return to Paris and Gurdjieff, I remember one night when we tried to keep the discussion strictly within the frame of the Gurdjieff cosmology. We had got as far as man's potentiality, of which he knows nothing, from there to the possible development of his three centers, so that they could act together instead of separately, then to the definition of the octave and man's function, his transference from one scale to another. Salita quoted some words of Gurdjieff. Quote, one must strive for being. If anyone desires to know and understand more than he knows and understands, he must remember that this new knowledge and new understanding will come through the emotional center and not through the mental center. End quote. But, she added, he also said, study everything. Know yourself, then humanity, then the planet. Study 48 hours a day. That's quite a Gurdjieff quote, isn't it? Study 48 hours a day. I'm going to read that again. He also said, study everything. Know yourself, then humanity, then the planet. Study 48 hours a day. Someone asked, but after you've studied and worked and understood, then what do you do? Or isn't there anything else to the Gurdjieff theory? Everyone was silent. Everyone looked at everyone else. I looked at Salita. What could she say? I could only think of things too long to say. Dorothy too looked at her. Is there anything beyond all this, Salita? Yes. What comes afterwards? Dorothy asked. Everything, said Salita. And so that's all for this evening, my friends. It's lovely to be back and to be with you. And as I say, tomorrow we have a few chapters. Apartment in Paris, Every Man is an Island, and The Death of a Mage. So we will finish the book tomorrow. And as I always say, and will continue to say, because I believe it's the truth, obviously, if you read one account of Gurdjieff or A Time with Gurdjieff, you get a very narrow view. If you read every book written about the particular time period, then you have a much better picture. And Fritz Peters gives good accounts, obviously Ouspensky of the early time, but there's many biographical texts on Gurdjieff that you can learn about his life. And of course, Orage and Margaret Anderson call it the method or the system, the work. They're in other books, and all of them together allows us to know Gurdjieff more intimately, more deeply. And of course, as he even said there, experience, understanding and work is the main thing. And so it's great to be back with you. We'll be back tomorrow to conclude the book. And then I think another essay that I really valued from the old channel, from Book Club, Taking Gurdjieff Seriously, we might read that on Tuesday night and have that fresh on the Four Ideals channel, because to take Gurdjieff seriously is an ideal, I would argue, and it will fit nicely into the Four Ideals framework. But for now, it was lovely to see you all. Thanks for joining, and it's good to be back. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow evening at 9:30, same time tomorrow, for the conclusion of The Unknowable Gurdjieff by Margaret Anderson. And Johnny Fettler, you're very welcome, my friend. Thank you from the Fens. So I don't know where that is, but Johnny, it's an absolute pleasure. You're most welcome, and we'll be back moving forward with lots more readings. And I look forward to sharing those with you. So everyone, great to see you. Look after yourselves. Take care. And I hope to see you tomorrow if you're free, interested, and available. Take care, guys. See you tomorrow.